I never thought I'd got to see a true successor to Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4. Someone who has played 1,500 hours of Battlefield 4, hundreds upon hundreds of hours of Battlefield 3, they're two games that hold really special places for me. It's a franchise that I absolutely love, and it's the reason this channel actually exists. The only reason I'm a YouTuber is because I literally just wanted to upload Battlefield 4 clips and gameplay that I was getting with my mates after school. Flash forward to 2025, and after what we can probably all agree has been a couple of successive rocky launches for Battlefield, this year felt like there were a lot of question marks around Battlefield 6. This was a go big or go home year for this franchise, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it genuinely feels like they might have actually gone big. And gone big in ways that not only satisfy what fans are looking for in Battlefield 6, but even exceed expectations in some places. The footage you're seeing in the background is from the multiplayer reveal event, which I was flown off to LA to attend, and this video isn't sponsored, but it should be noted that I was flown to attend this event and there will be other sponsored content around it. So just for clarity's sake and transparency's sake, this impressions video is just me unfiltered, but there will be some sponsored content in conjunction with this. And this also isn't actually the first time I've played Battlefield 6. I can now actually publicly say that I've been playing Battlefield 6 for quite some time, as early as January 2025, and providing feedback and conversation loops with developers, community managers, and just trying to help steer the direction that this game has been heading in. I can't talk massively extensively about that feedback, and I can't necessarily disclose everything that I've played, but the idea is quite simple. They wanted people who have played the franchise and loved the franchise to have an input on the game. I can't even guarantee that the devs necessarily listened to that feedback, but it was nice to feel like they actually wanted this game to land with people who have lots of time in the franchise and want to see Battlefield be Battlefield. Nothing else. We're not looking for COD, we're not looking for Overwatch, we're not looking for Valorant. We just want a core Battlefield experience in multiplayer that ticks all of the boxes, and honestly, I really feel like they're there. The other disclaimer for this is that although I'm extremely excited about what I played, which was a closed build of Battlefield 6, we only got about 8 hours of hands-on time with this specific build, and it's going to take a lot longer to formulate opinions about things like weapon balancing, the class system, which has both an open variant that allows you to use weapons across classes, and a closed variant that locks it to a traditional Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 style format. We also have only had access to a specific subset of weapons, vehicles, and maps that will be the final product of this game. And whilst I really enjoyed what I got to play and have some pretty great feedback about what it was that we did play, the reality is that the final package for what is Battlefield 6 is a much larger, big snapshot compared to what we got hands-on with. And, you know, just because part of the whole is really good doesn't necessarily mean that the whole will be fantastic, but at least it's an indication that things are heading in the right direction. Now, alongside being able to give you all of this gameplay, we actually got to do a Q&A session with the developers and speak to them about certain things that are happening in Battlefield 6. And there's some really exciting things. For example, a complete remaster of Operation Firestorm, a fan favorite, is returning to Battlefield 6, which I think is really cool to see. And honestly, I do feel like some of the maps that are in there, like Cairo, for example, will probably end up being fan favorite maps. I consider Cairo, which is the Egypt infantry-based map, to essentially be Operation Locker 2.0. And I really feel like it's a fantastic showcase of the destruction, infantry combat, and it's just something I can see being a fan favorite. But quite possibly the biggest sale point of this game, and I think the thing that is going to be astronomically different to any Battlefield we have ever played before. And I will go on and talk about maps, gunplay, classes, and vehicles in this video, but we have to talk about Battlefield Portal, because this isn't just Battlefield Portal, here's a server browser and some custom ideas and some silly modes that you might be able to put together. This is Battlefield Portal. You can create entire custom modes with a spatial editor that allows you to move map assets and physical items around the map and almost redesign maps. So essentially a full Fortnite-style editor system with a logic system, an AI system that allows you to figure out bots and things like that, a full-blown map editing system. Just absolutely an entire tool suite of tools that is going to allow players to host their own experiences on a server browser share experiences with one another, and create wacky, wonderful, and grounded experiences that people will know and love. So, we're talking everything from realistic modes with no harden maximum damage to potentially even mission styles where you create your own AI scripts, you create your own mission concepts, and throw people into them. And we're even talking about stupid modes like, racing modes like GTA style or like Halo Forge style funny modes. Like, absolutely everything you can kind of picture from the depths of Grand Theft Auto 5's editors and Fortnite's editors is going to have some place in Battlefield 6. Now, we don't know the full extent of it, but what was shown in the reveal trailer looked like it was going to be absolutely bonkers. And in the Q&A segment, they said that, they really see the replayability of Battlefield 6 not only being the core multiplayer experience, but the fact that you can essentially craft any experience in Battlefield Portal, make it your own, and do lots with it. I'm already envisioning modes in Battlefield 6 that are silly, limited-time modes that you would expect to see from seasonal content, but happening all the time. Whether it's a content creator who's working with his teammates and his mods to put together specific modes and experiences, or just really committed Battlefield fans who want like an 8v8 tank mode, or like want to redesign a map so that it works a certain way. The possibilities here are potentially endless. And what's being done with Battlefield Portal will elevate Battlefield from, potential custom experiences in 2042 that were pretty hit and miss, to Battlefield, holy crap, we can kind of do things to a similar scale and extent as something like the Grand Theft Auto editor or the Fortnite editor, and the possibilities for what the community wants to do with that is absolutely endless. I'm already envisioning Battlefield 6 experiences ranging from just sheer madness like, hand-to-hand combat in the sky to, jet races, to parachute races, to, milsim experiences being crafted by custom. The reason Battlefield Portal is making up a good portion of this video is because the sheer potential for what this could be for this franchise is absolutely immense, and it genuinely cannot be understated. What you saw in the reveal trailer of all of these wacky things occurring and all of these grounded experiences being created, that is the future of Battlefield. And I honestly think it sets Battlefield 6 up potentially for the next 3 to 4 to 5 years, just off of replayability alone. I mentioned at the start of this video that this was a go big or go home experience for Battlefield, and from what I played, Battlefield 6 is certainly going big. Now, again, with a caveat, all of this is 8 hours of hands-on experience, and the final product needs to deliver. If everything is as polished as the build I got to play at this multiplayer reveal event, then we're off for a great time, because it was ultimately pretty heavily polished with a handful of bugs here and there that were noticeable, but arguably probably one of the less or least jank Battlefield experiences that I've had in terms of bugs, things going wrong, glitches, issues. Like, they've done a really solid job. Now, again, this is just a snapshot, but if we're heading in the direction where everything has this degree of polish and finish, then we're looking to a Battlefield 6 game that's going to release without any major problems. But the proof for that is in the pudding, and we'll have to check back in on that around October 10th when this game releases. But without further ado, let's talk about the core elements of gameplay that I got to play. To start with, the maps. Now, the maps are a little bit of a question mark for me in this game, because what I played I did really enjoy, and in fact I think all of the maps had really redeeming features, except for one of the really small ones, which was based in New York, and was primarily used for squad deathmatch. Now, we have the Cairo map, which again I consider to be an Operation Locker 2.0 that I think is going to be a massive smash hit, that has a full focus on an infantry-based experience with the odd IFV thrown into the mix. And I think, crafting these experiences that work around set arsenals for these maps is fantastic, and if people want to mess around with things in Portal in the future and change some of these elements, then that's great. But it felt like a very driven experience towards real CQB combat, lots of destruction, and the Cairo map felt a little bit like some of the Battlefield 3 Aftermath maps, and honestly, massive fan. Like, this is an S-tier map, and I think people are going to really enjoy it. The next map is Liberation Peak, and this is where things get a little bit interesting for me. Now, we know that there will be 9 maps at release, and this will include, of course, Operation Firestorm, which is a bit more of a classical map, and something that we consider to be a large-scale Battlefield map. But Liberation Peak is a combined arms map. It has helicopters, it has tanks, and it has jets. And whilst these elements do work together, this definitely feels like a medium minus map in terms of a Battlefield experience. And I guess there's kind of two ways of looking at that. Like for me, as a sort of immediate pessimist, my brain said, these guys just really want to appease Call of Duty players. They just want the Call of Duties to love this game. And then on the flip side of that, I kind of thought about it and thought, well, actually at the same time, this is very reminiscent of what Bad Company maps resembled in terms of Bad Company 1 and Bad Company 2. And honestly, if you look at Liberation Peak and then you go back and look at some of the layouts to some of the earlier Bad Company 2 maps, which ultimately was a more infantry-focused game, you could probably say that they're pretty much the same or fairly similar. From what we played in terms of the Cairo map and then also Liberation Peak, it feels like Battlefield has a very distinct idea of what it wants its time to engagement to look like in Battlefield 6. They don't necessarily want this to be some of the really large BF3 and BF4 maps from back in the day, where sometimes there was just a lot of downtime, and some people would critique them and say that they were boring. And then at the same time, it does wonder, and you do start to think, well, okay, is there going to be enough variety in this game at launch to satisfy the entire player base? For me, Operation Firestorm obviously is one of the larger maps in Battlefield, something akin to something like Caspian Border. But at the same time, those maps are fundamentally what makes a Battlefield game, and there needs to be a decent amount of them in every title. That being said, from what we played from Cairo and from what we played from Liberation Peak, those maps are very distinct experiences, and they're clearly trying to do very specific things. I don't think Liberation Peak is going to be hugely popular. I would consider that to be more of a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. I don't think it's a bad map, I just don't think it's a phenomenal map, whereas the Cairo map definitely is just a straight 10 out of 10, no notes, people are going to love it. The other two maps we got to play were distinctly small focuses. Now, I do believe that there are larger variants of these, but we specifically played them on like Domination and Squad Deathmatch. One of them was based in Gibraltar, the other one was based in downtown New York or somewhere around Brooklyn. And both of these look really cool, and they seem to offer some sort of unique alleyways and CQB experiences, but we didn't get to try the sort of conquest and breakthrough variants of these, or what that kind of biome will look like in a larger scale. So it's really kind of difficult to judge, are those going to be good medium-sized maps? Are they going to be distinctly smaller experiences? We do know that the Gibraltar map does have a larger scale format. So, there's a couple of question marks for me around the variety of maps at the release of this game, and I think it's something that is going to be pretty important in terms of how this game is received, and also is something that is going to be excessively important when they start delivering more content to the game. Because if the consensus becomes, okay, these maps are medium-ish, but not quite the large-scale experience that we need, and the only large map is maybe one or two of them, then you start to wonder, okay, do we have too many medium-sized maps? Are some of these kind of a medium-minus map? And what direction are we heading in here? So, whilst again, I think Liberation Peak and I think, the Cairo map experiences were good experiences, and the Cairo map was an excellent experience in particular, the final package for Battlefield 6 is a little bit of a question mark for me. And it kind of depends on your preferences for Battlefield. If you're somebody who preferred the more infantry-focused Bad Company 2, you're probably going to enjoy this a little bit more. And if you're somebody who perhaps found that Battlefield 3 and 4 had a little bit too much downtime and sometimes felt a bit empty, you probably are going to prefer the Battlefield 6 experience. But if you're somebody who prefers your sort of large Golmud Railway style maps, your Caspian Borders, you prefer a larger experience on the whole, there's a little bit of a question mark there, and I really want to see how that's going to pan out, and I want to see the final array of maps and what they consider them to be in terms of sizes. The next up for me is gunplay and movement, and I think this is something that's become more and more important in modern shooters because certain franchises that we need not named have kind of gone off the deep end in terms of movement abilities, in terms of gunplay feeling really floaty and flimsy. And, Battlefield has kind of always been renowned for a bit more of a, kick-in-your-face, gritty-style gunplay experience, and also just generally more grounded movement, and they've absolutely aced that. Battlefield 6 has crouch running and regular running. It does have a minor slide, but we're not talking the kind of slide where you can slide around a corner and delete somebody and you're going to break their camera. We're talking about a slide that kind of keeps you in momentum while still being mobile. You can't really necessarily drop shot or jump shot without there being distinct penalties, and this doesn't feel like spammy movement. You know, we're not talking about your Black Ops 6 Omni movements, we're not talking about COD in any capacity, really. We're talking about a more grounded movement system that favors people moving from cover to cover, but isn't necessarily sluggish. There are some animations where I feel like things are a little bit clunky or feel a little bit slow to react, and if they maybe tighten those up a little bit, it would feel a little bit better. But it feels like a Battlefield gunplay and movement experience. It feels a little bit like Battlefield 5, actually. I think it's probably the best example. And whilst I know that wasn't everybody's favorite game, there's no denying that the sort of visceral recoil patterns and the movement system in that game felt really good. So this is somewhere around that mark, somewhere sort of in between a Battlefield 5 and a Battlefield 3 for me, and they are focusing on distinct recoil patterns for weapons. They are focusing on this new attachment system, which we will of course touch on in this video as well. But on the whole, I'm happy with it. Like, this feels satisfying. Getting kills feels satisfying in this game. Balancing is obviously something that's always going to come up in Battlefield, and there are going to be things that are completely unbalanced and need to be rebalanced, but that's just every Battlefield, you know, and also there's no point talking about it in an early access version of the game that's miles off of the launch date, and hypothetically, you know, everything in the balancing of that game could completely change 4 times over before it hits your desk. You know, there was a shotgun in the game that was bugged, and it didn't have dispersion, so all 8 pellets were kind of hitting central mass and killing people quite quickly. So there's really just no point talking about something like that because we knew it was bugged, and also the entire balance of that class, the entire balance of that weapon will likely completely change over the course of the 3 beta weeks that they're doing, or 3 beta weekends. And I imagine a lot of data around balancing is going to occur during that period of time. But in terms of just the raw feel of it, it felt good. And also, you know, that kind of combination and synergy between gunplay, movement, and maps, it's something we have been missing for a really long time in Battlefield, something we love about Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, and I felt it in Battlefield 6. Now, in Battlefield 3 and 4, and for those of you who've played those games extensively, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about here. The enjoyment arc of that game comes from taking a completely messy situation and controlling the chaos of that situation. You know, finding the little gaps of cover to hit the reloads, you know, finding the windows of time to make the educated push or use a piece of equipment, or, you know, just intelligently move around a situation to get the flanks, to get the kills, to get the back rages, and to make things happen. And you really did feel like that was in this game. The amount of times I had the ability to just sort of, you know, drop myself into a corner, hit a quick reload, get back up, use hard cover to take someone out, drop back in, get another reload. You know, it just really, it felt like that kind of smooth synergy that I want from a Battlefield experience, the controlled chaos of an environment that I want from a Battlefield experience. And I got to see it. And I was kind of like almost shocked in a way, because I was sort of regularly placing quite high on the leaderboard, and it's been quite a while since I've mained a Battlefield game extensively. And yeah, man, like it's just nice. It's nice to feel that kind of BF3, BF4 windows of engagement where you kind of work through cover, work through gunfights, and work back in, just unfolding in front of you. Next is classes and customization. Now, the class system in Battlefield 6 has 2 SKUs. Going into the beta, there will be an open variant that allows you to use any weapon on any class, with downsides and upsides depending on if that weapon is what that class is supposed to use. And then there will also be a variant that's completely locked, akin to something like Battlefield 4, where the only crossover weapons are shotguns, DMRs, and carbines. And both of those will be available for you to try in the beta, but we don't necessarily know if both of them will be available at launch, or if they're going to choose one or the other. It's a bit of a question mark and asterisk around the game at this moment in time. That being said, for me, I think the actual definition of some of these classes will still need work, and I think it's something that's going to be worked on over the course of the beta up until launch. There's just a couple of decisions that to me don't quite add up. Like, I think the Recon class, for example, is in a really good spot. I think the Engineer class is in a really good spot. Support seemingly having, you know, heals and ammunition at the same time feels like a bit of a question mark to me. And then also the Assault class having, like, multiple grenade launchers that they can spam away, as well as also, you know, just being the assault class I don't know, there was the ability to take a second weapon in an assault class instead of a gadget, so having 2 primary weapons and then a grenade launcher, or just choosing 1 primary weapon and then having like a flashbang launcher and a grenade launcher. You know, there seems to be a bit of an emphasis around utility spam for the assault class, and I just don't think that's the direction they should be going in, especially considering every single Battlefield over the last decade or so has had to deal with some kind of explosive spam nerf, because they go, damn guys, we added 7 tons of explosives to this game, and guess what people did? They used them. So in terms of defining those class roles and in terms of, you know, refining that experience, I still think there's some work to do there, but it doesn't feel like it's something that's inherently broken that can't be fixed. It just feels like something that needs tweaking and tuning, and I think the beta is going to really inform a lot of their decisions about how these things are taking place, giving them data on telemetry and the amount of explosive spam and what they could be tweaking and what pieces of gadgets and equipment could come to the game. We know, for example, that there will be, for example, a combat ladder that will allow you to climb through certain windows or scale to different heights, and that wasn't something that was available in the build that we played, but it was in the trailer, and it's definitely something coming to Battlefield 6. So the overarching sort of balance between these classes, what these classes have in terms of weaponry and in terms of what they will look like at launch, is a question mark around this game. It looks like Battlefield is probably still going to offer both of those experiences at launch, but that isn't a guarantee. But honestly, I just think it didn't detract from the experience. Although I did kind of sort of wonder, okay, am I really sitting well with some of these class decisions? Yes or no? And I'm kind of thinking about how that was going in my head. At the same time, I still was just having fun. So I guess, in a very basic tenet of the word, I guess something was working, or something definitely did make sense. Now, in terms of the signature weapon system, for those of you who are interested, the signature weapon system essentially gives you better perks for using weapons in your class. So, for example, if you're an engineer and you use an SMG, you'll benefit from better SMG handling as well as a better hipfire spread. So it's just something that incentivizes using that category of weapon. Whereas in the closed system, it will just simply be closed and you won't have the option to try other things. One thing I will universally say though, and this applies to both the class systems, the weapons and equipments available, and also the vehicles, which we'll touch on next, is that it feels like they're starting from a position where everything feels quite powerful and quite good, and is going to refine them downward and nerf them over time, as opposed to everything feeling kind of bad and figuring out how to buff them upwards. I do prefer a system where everything just feels quite powerful, and then they figure out how to balance certain elements in between. But again, balancing is one of those things that in this video I've just not really paid too much attention to, because it is something that is just a fundamental process that happens with every single Battlefield game, and is going to ebb and flow a lot between now and October 10th. Before I do dive into vehicles, I do want to say, alongside this build being incredibly quite polished in places, there were some really fantastic things to see that this game was doing in terms of just immersion factor. Obviously, destruction is something that I haven't even touched on in this video yet, because I almost feel like I don't have to. Like, just look at the footage. The destruction elements in this game are fantastic. You can knock out entire buildings in places. You can literally level the entire front faces of some buildings. You know, the Cairo map truly felt like it was a destruction playground to some extent. You can even cave in the floors and ceilings to try and make flanks and attempts on people in the game. And destruction this year looks like it's heading in a really great direction, and if it's this level of depth and fidelity across all of the maps, then we're going to be in for a fantastic time. But the grit factor that this game has, and the visceralness that it has, and the immersion that it has, is truly fantastic. Like, they've really captured that kind of BF1 style war essence and put it into a modern shooter. You know, seeing the shells from a tank eject, hearing the sort of general gunfights and the ambience of even some of the maps, and even just some of the minor details. Like, for example, if you fire a rocket launcher like an RPG, and it isn't in activation range, which means the missile hasn't traveled far enough for it to explode, it will literally just bounce off of the object as an actual projectile, which is absolutely insanely cool to see happen in real time. So there's just a bunch of those decisions that just makes the game feel super intense and super warlike, and I'm really loving the tone and direction of these maps and the direction of the gunplay and how these things are feeling and coming together, because it feels like that kind of grounded, gritty BF3 experience, with some question marks about the final product, of course, but the tone, the direction, and a clear kind of understanding that DICE, Ripple Effect, and the people working on this game, and BF Studios as a whole, has a direction for this game that is quite well refined. They know that they want Battlefield 6 to be that kind of, grounded, dark, gritty experience, and it's heading in the right direction for that. Finally, before I end up this video, let's touch on vehicles. As somebody who loves his helicopters, loves his jets, loves his tanks, and loves his IFVs, again, these kind of do fall in the category of finding that perfect balance. But honestly, it was pretty decent. Now, there weren't a lot of Battlefield demons and guys who are like super OP at like helicopters, who know the ins and outs of everything. So I'm sure they will find some cheese to exploit at some point or another. But as somebody who enjoys all of those vehicles as a whole, I actually had a really good time with them. I think the IFVs and tanks in particular feel quite rugged. They're a little bit clunky in places in terms of being slow, but I do feel like that's a balancing element that has been deliberately decided. But the IFV shells actually felt deadly against infantry, tanks felt like they were absolutely smashing lighter vehicles, helicopters felt like they could rain down fire, but if you got too low, you would end up being cannon fodder for somebody's missile launcher, which happened to me on more than one occasion. And jets, well, that's the only question mark I have. They feel good, and they feel great, but we only got to play it on one map, and it kind of almost felt like that map didn't necessarily need jets, but I guess we'll have to wait to see what that final map package looks like. So, all in all, what I got to play at Battlefield's multiplayer reveal event was a straight 8.5 to 9 out of 10. That's how much fun I had with it. The second I finished, I just wanted to carry on playing more, and I just really enjoyed myself. Now, I do think Battlefield Portal is an experience that, if done and executed correctly, will elevate this game to fantastic places. But at the same time, and flip side of that, I also recognize that the final launch package in terms of the game, A, being functional and working properly, and also B, just like, things not being busted, and then also C, like the content package at the end, 9 maps again, as was mentioned before, and also just what weapons, vehicles, etc. are available, does create the final package as a whole. So there are still some question marks around Battlefield 6, but it really is heading in a really good direction, and I honestly just hope they stick the landing. The trailer was fantastic, the reveal was fantastic, the information is fantastic. It's now just on them to really execute those final bits. I hope you enjoyed this impressions video today. There's going to be loads of Battlefield 6 content on the channel, so make sure you drop a like, make sure you subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the gameplay.
or we will lose control of this fight.
Good work. Press it.
We are attacking objective Delta.
I'm tracking a hostile helicopter in the mission area.
Throwing frag!
Marked objective is under threat. Defend the position. Bravo is under attack. Hostiles are engaging objective Delta. Hostiles are attacking objective Bravo. We have lost objective Bravo. Attention, attack support is needed on the marked objective.
Good hit! Enemy are down!
We have eyes on an enemy
Overwatch
killer in your
requested on
area.
my grid!
Initiated on Bravo Charlie. We now control objective Foxtrot. Be advised, hostiles are engaging objective Delta.
I got enemy in sight!
There are hostile rockets just south of your first position.
Charlie has been neutralized. We have secured Charlie. We are close to mission complete. Press on and take